Hey, welcome to the Kingdoms Podcast. My name is Luke and I host this with my buddy Matt Ma. And our goal is to empower you to discover how your faith impacts culture for God's kingdom. To do that, we're sitting down with different men and women from all kinds of disciplines to uncover how they, through their ambitions and vocational skill set, make a difference in the lives of those around them. And so if this is helpful to you, we'd love it if you could like it, share it, and subscribe. In the meantime, enjoy today's episode. Hey friends, thank you so much for joining us. I'm Pastor Luke. I'm here with Matt Ma, and Mike Gordon, he's a Christian motivational speaker, has joined us to be on this interview together today. Mike, thank you so much for being with us.
Hey, thanks for inviting me and letting me hang out with you guys from London, Ontario. You guys are up north of Toronto, so thank you.
Dude, 100%. Well, Mike, we go back a few years. You've done an awesome job contributing to some of the summer camp ministries that Matt and I have been a part of in the past. So yeah, it's really awesome to have you with us. But Mike, we want to dive right in, and just can you give us a thumbnail sketch of who Mike Gordon is and what he does for a career?
Yeah, that's a great question. Great job. No, but seriously, sometimes people don't really know what I do. I might just pop up at a camp and speak. And they might think, well, then he goes home, maybe he's a mechanic or works at a church. But no, the speaking is what I do full time. I've done 16 years of full-time ministry, but the last 9 years, I've been on the road full-time speaking across Canada, the US, around the world, literally, to all ages, like young people, old people, anyone in between. And I love it. But yeah, 9 years full-time traveling. Wow. This is what I do. This is all I do for the most part, and I love it.
What's your favorite country outside of North America that you've been to speak in?
Israel. Yeah, 2 years ago. Yeah, 2 years ago, I was preaching at a church in Jerusalem, and
that's incredible.
And just to because Jesus has been there, it's like physically he's been there. It's pretty cool to be on that turf, in that land,
Absolutely.
Maybe Jesus might have been standing 10 feet away from where I was, and have the privilege to be booked and flown out there to speak. It was so cool. That because I'm a Christian, I have to say Jerusalem,
Yeah, well, 100%, man. So with the travel, with the privilege and the invite to be booked to travel places to speak, what would you say is your favorite thing about that? Whether it's in Israel or in Canada, what do you love most about that role?
Yeah, well, first of all, when I started ministry, I hated speaking. I loved everything about ministry but speaking. I love organizing games. I love walking with people. I love discipleship. Speaking, hated it. And over the years, that part grew in me. I'm not sure how. I was kind of thrown into it. And you speak and speak and speak. And for whatever reason, that passion started to grow to the point where I started putting my attention onto the traveling, speaking side of ministry. And like I said, I've been doing it 9 years now. So 9 years ago, I felt the time is right to take the step and really see where it goes. I think my answer probably changed in the 9 years. I think 9 years ago, the reason why I do what I do and love what I love most about what I do was the speaking part. Mm-hmm. And I love crafting messages and try to use my storytelling and humor and create something that gives someone. And I still love that. But over the years, when you do this, you realize that speaking gives you an invitation into people's lives.
Yeah.
So I speak. Awesome. Who knows? Maybe no one listens, but but you speak. But then all of a sudden, maybe afterwards, someone said, "Hey, can I talk to you?" And then all of a sudden, they're opening up about, "Hey, my family or my mom and dad are getting a divorce." Well, they probably would not have shared that with me if it wasn't for me speaking and being on a certain platform. Or on social media, I get these random messages all the time of, "Hey, can you pray for me?" Or "I have a question," or "I relate to, something you shared." And over the years, it went from the speaking being the favorite part of the speaking ministry to the opportunity to walk with people and to invest in people's lives. I think that has become my favorite part. And I understand, they go hand in hand. I don't think I will have those opportunities without the speaking side of the ministry. So,
Yeah.
so I started with speaking, and now I still love the speaking part of it, but it's the people part of it that really gets me excited.
Yeah.
It is really amazing how, like, when we speak God's word and we encourage people with it, how there is like that intimacy that begins to happen, even though, you know, we might not even know each other, that like God's spirit is working within us. It's pretty incredible.
Well, I 100% agree with you, and it's weird in a good way.
Yeah.
Like, wow, like for whatever reason, like again, they were listening, I guess. But something connected with them to say, let's go talk to that person. And a lot of times, like, you know, if they're talking to me, I'll pray for them. But even as a speaker along the way, as much as I love people, I love walking with people and supporting them and praying for them and giving them encouragement or advice. I always point them back to the local church. And what I mean by that is I say, hey, I can give you advice, but go talk to your youth pastor, you know, or youth pastor, or they're the ones walking with you every single week, where I might pop up once a year at your church, you know, and so to even walk with people, but understand I do have my limit as well. And to be effective with, hey, go talk to your youth leader, your pastor, whoever it is. And, you know, especially on the deeper stuff where someone's talking about depression, you know, I'm not going to be like, oh, cool, thumbs up, you know, on Facebook, you know that's you know, it's like, hey, maybe there's someone else you can talk to, you know, I'll pray for you, message me anytime. But again, maybe there's someone that you can meet with on a regular basis. So
that's in your setting, on your in your context.
Yeah, 100%. And that's something I've learned along the way, right? Because when I started speaking, I was coming out of years of pastoring. So years of pastoring, you're walking with people. And when I first started speaking, I still had that pastor heart in the sense of I want to walk with everyone, you know, as far as I can and be that person for them. And one of my mentors a couple of years ago challenged me on that. He said, well, Mike, as a speaker, your job is to kind of sow the seeds. And there's pastors and local churches and leaders and their job to water them. And the reality is, as a speaker, yeah, maybe there's a few people you can kind of water the seeds in their life, but if you're speaking to tens of thousands of people, you know, maybe at one event, let alone a year, you can't walk with everyone on that deep level. And that's something I've learned along the way. And that changed in me as I maybe got older and mature, or again, a mentor speaking into me and saying, yeah, sow the seeds, pray for them, give them advice. Here's a scripture. Here's an answer to a question. But point them back to the people who can actually walk with them and water the seeds. Where you'll see the fruit, right? And I love it.
Yeah, 100%.
So, like, throughout kind of the description that you've given so far, you've talked about how you were a pastor for a good chunk of time, how you've been a speaker. At what point in your life did Christianity become sort of, you know, this is something that I kind of associate myself with, to I want my whole life to be about Jesus. I want Jesus as my king. I want to give everything to him and live every single day traveling around. So at what point did that become your heart's desire?
That's a great question. I might say that for every question. That's a great question. But that really is a great question. To understand my background a little bit, I did not grow up in a church home, in a Christian home. However, I grew up in Canada, and I think a lot of people in Canada, at least when I was growing up in the 80s, early 90s, I think a lot of families would just identify with being Christian without anything maybe deeper than that. Might be a little different now in 2020, but at least, 30 years ago, it was, hey, we identify. So I think my introduction to Christianity was just living in a family that identifies being Christian. That's basically it, whatever that meant. But through the years, I never lived that lifestyle, nothing like that. But in high school, I just got involved in some dumb decisions, and the wrong crowd and whatnot. Kind of like a typical teenager, to be honest. And it was end of high school. I had a friend who invited me to a basketball ministry run by a church. And that's when I was really introduced to a Christian community, if that makes any sense. Yeah. I knew people who were Christian, but I don't know if I ever intentionally hung out with a group of Christians. So I went to the basketball ministry. It wasn't just Christian there, but through that, I got connected to the youth ministry and Christians my age. And that's when, you know, all of a sudden I started becoming interested.
Yeah.
Maybe not interested. Open maybe might be the better word to use.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't so much the Jesus part that drew me to it. It was just the people part, and seeing here are people who are full of life and joy, and it has something that I did not have. And I think I was looking for it, living the life I was. You know, I was going down to Broad Road and kind of following whatever way the culture says I should live, thinking that might bring the joy and the peace and, you know, feeling accepted and loved. And now I meet this group of people who seem to have that, at least understand it. Doesn't mean their life is trouble free in any way, shape, or form, but it seemed like it had something that I was looking for. And so I started going to the youth group, got connected there, and through hanging out with them, you know, you're listening to Bible studies or sermons, and you're showing up to church, and it's hard to kind of ignore that message. And over time, like I wasn't a dummy. You start putting those two together, like, hey, here's a group of people, and hey, here's Jesus, and here's the Spirit, and now it's all making sense.
So Bible plus the Holy Spirit plus your life's changed. Wow. I didn't. Yeah.
Exactly. And so it kept me connected with the church. At the end of high school, I made a decision to give my life to Christ. And I don't think I really knew what that meant. In fact, you know, like that night where I gave my life to Christ, it was in Mexico of all places. And
why were you in Mexico?
Well, you know, what does that mean? I don't know. I accidentally signed up for a mission trip. And so with the same church I was at, they're like, hey, we're doing a mission trip in Mexico in March. And I'm like, well, I live in Canada, so it means, you know, March means winter and snow still, typically.
Let's go to Mexico.
I signed up for a mission trip. I don't think I really knew what I was signing up for. I thought, hey, you go down there, you know, hang out with some kids, and, you know, then hang out with a youth group and
go swimming at the beach.
Well, yeah, no joke. Like, I packed a bathing suit.
Yeah. I wouldn't do if I was
we're like in the middle of the desert. There's like no water in sight anywhere.
Yeah.
It's like, this is a cactus.
It's so bad. We flew down to El Paso, Texas, spent the first night there, then went over the border and did the mission work. And it shows you how naive I was. That first night in El Paso, they did a slideshow. Like, here's where we're going to be staying. Here's what the facilities look like. And I'm just like, what? It's like, it's not a hotel. Like, they're showing us like what the bathroom looked like. I'm like, what did I sign up for? Like, this is not like a vacation. I thought we'll hang out like a nice hotel and then, you know, again, go help someone for an hour and then, you know, go home and go swimming. Wasn't the situation at all. But when I was down there, another pastor, he did a gospel presentation and shared Jesus and really put everything together for me. Because at that point, I was showing up to church. You hear about Jesus, you hear about sin, you hear about Adam and Eve, and I don't think I ever heard anyone put it all together. Because I did not grow up in church, I didn't have that full background. So and put it all together, and this pastor and did like an altar call, said, if you want to come to the front, give your life to Christ, go for it. Now, to understand this in context, the people,
I was going to say, this is amazing.
Yeah, it's so cool. But to understand this in context, the pastor's not speaking to like a village. He's not speaking to like locals. He's doing a talk for 30 teenagers who all signed up for a mission trip.
Yeah, wow.
As a speaker for me, like, if 30 people signed up for a mission trip, I wouldn't plan like a give your life to Christ message. I would assume everyone already done that. You know, why would they be on a mission trip? So it's insane to me in a good way that this pastor was like, no, I'm going to take this opportunity, just do one talk on a Wednesday night, the full gospel, and then give this invitation. The problem was, it seemed like everybody else had given their life to Christ. So when he said, come up to the front, I'm looking around, I'm like, is anyone else going up? Because I'm not going up alone. Like, you know, and I was so embarrassed to go up by myself. I sat there in my chair. But later that night, I went back to my room, started praying. I'm bawling. I'm just like, my credibility gone at this point, you know? And so I'm like crying, and I made a decision. And I don't think I really knew, I understood the salvation part. But I really looked at it more in that moment of my life. You know, I literally said this to God. I remember it very well. I said, I'm done doing life my way. I want to do life your way.
Wow.
And what I meant by that is I don't want to just say I believe, and continue living the same lifestyle I lived before and say, hey, I got my ticket to heaven now because I made a decision, in Mexico.
Just
But I
fire
really
insurance,
wanted,
really.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I really said, I want to start doing life your way and start actually following you and becoming Christ-like, maybe turning from the stuff that I was doing that wasn't Christ-like. And that was one of the big turning points in my life. So again, it wasn't just a, hey, here's a moment. Yeah, I believe. It's a, let's actually do this, because I'd seen the other side of life from my perspective. And I knew that's not what I wanted anymore. So I got back to Toronto after that mission trip, and like everything changed. Like my lifestyle changed. And it wasn't automatic. Well, sorry, some things were just automatic. Like, I was drinking, doing, the odd drug. And I think I was a God thing where like those temptations were just gone, just nothing.
Yeah.
Total. So there's things that change immediately. I still have my part to play though. So I was wise enough right off the bat to realize if I keep hanging out with that same group of friends I did all this stuff with, probably in a couple of weeks, I'll be back to that same lifestyle. So there were decisions I had to make to kind of detach myself from that group of friends and just stop some lifestyle choices that was also connected beyond just kind of like drinking and stuff. So yeah, there's my step to play. So it wasn't just like an automatic like 180 and I was like a robot and all of a sudden there was intentional things, but I also realized in hindsight God did remove some stuff out of me as well. And I think because of that, connecting that to your question, Matt, and ministry, as I saw how God changed my life, and also saw that we can take steps to really become Christ-like and really start walking this road, this narrow road that Jesus called us to live. I truly believe that the message of God's grace, His love, like discipleship, like all that stuff, salvation. I truly believe that can make a difference in anyone's life, and it's not like one of those like commercials where the old grandma's like, "Hey, look, I use this little ab roller, now I got a 6-pack." And then she said, if I can do it, you can do it too. You know those weird commercials?
Yeah.
I mean, like, Grandma, you're not doing that. It's but I kind of had that kind of maybe almost like arrogance, in hindsight, thinking like, oh yeah, God changed my life. He can change anyone's life. I totally believed that and understood that. And that really motivated me to, again, take this seriously and start sharing Jesus with people.
Wow.
It took me a few years to mature and understand, like, hey, when someone makes a decision to give their life to Christ, that doesn't always mean like their temptations are gone, And there's some people, like when I was brand new to ministry, not even ministry at this point, but it's brand new to Christianity. I share Jesus with people, and someone might say, yeah, I want to follow Jesus, and they make a decision, and I'm like, but you're still tempted here, and you're still doing this. I'm like, maybe you should give your life to Christ again. Like you're thinking like, oh, like
Take two.
I should have all these things change. And I realize now, like, it's not always the case, right? And I understand I was very blessed for whatever situation I was in. But that really inspired me to go towards ministry because I wanted people to know Jesus ultimately and know really who they are in Christ and understand this bigger picture. And now, obviously, when you go into ministry, I think there is a higher expectation too on your walk with Jesus. And now you have all these people watching you, and not that pressure, but there is pressure. Like if I decide one day, like, you know what, I'm going to take a day off from following Jesus and, go down to a bar or a strip club, like, well, that can destroy, not just my ministry, but also someone looking at me saying, well, I was looking up to Mike. He was the guy that was kind of inspiring me to follow Jesus. And now, so when you're in leadership, it raises the bar even more to really be very clear about the steps and your action and walking in obedience. That doesn't mean I'm perfect. I'm not going to strip club, by the way, if you're watching this. Cut it out.
We figure.
I know I'm still human. However, I'm realizing being in leadership, it does it raises the bar in some aspects.
Man, can I just say though? Can I just say I love that though, Mike? I love that you're thinking that because that's something I'd love to tease out in a second with you. But like, without even knowing Jesus personally, you follow on some level of obedience and going to Mexico on this mission trip. And like in that initial act of obedience, like God does something transformational in your life. which I think there's so much merit to, because I feel like God loves to work in that way, whether or not we have yet to fully embrace the gospel or have embraced the gospel. God loves to act on us being willing to step forward, even when maybe we like don't realize what we're signing up for, or don't know exactly what to expect, or maybe even aren't even the people best equipped for that. And then God does something transformative in our lives. I think there's probably a lot greater risk when people are just like, I got this. It's actually way better to be like, whoa, what could God do? But Mike, with what you were just saying about your example in leadership, in that season, you give your life to Christ in your grade 12 year. You're starting to grow and mature and change. And obviously now you're in a leadership role, but can I ask, what would you say are some of those main things that gave you a sense of calling, that God was tapping on your heart and saying, Mike, this is what I want to invite you into? Because obviously you're not like a plumber, which could be great, or you're not like a lawyer, which could also be great, or you're not like a doctor, which could be great. Like this is what God has launched you into, despite the fact that it doesn't sound like anyone else in your family was like, Mike, go be in a form of ministry. So how did God call you into that?
Yeah, so that's a great question too. So because I gave my life to Christ at the end of high school, at this point it's March, like I've already signed up to study business after high school, which I did for 2 years, actually more than 2 years, whatever it was. I studied business for a couple of years. And it was a joint program with a college and a university in Toronto. So it's like, I think it was like 2 years and then 3 years, something weird like that. 5-year program. Anyways, that was the plan, go do business. 2 years in, I mean, I love the business stuff, and business actually played a big part of my ministry. Weirdly enough, with developing ministries and behind the scenes.
Yeah.
However, 2 years in, if you realize going to school costs money, and so the church I started going to through the basketball ministry, they were hiring their first ever summer intern. And I looked at it as it's really close to my house, full-time hours, the pay wasn't bad, like, their minimum wage, and they were topping it up like $2 extra or something like that. Which at that point in my life, $10 an hour or whatever it would have been, like, that was awesome.
You're killing it. Yeah.
Yeah, killing it. So I threw my resume in, and I knew some people who applied for the job, and like they'd been to the church their whole life, or some of them were like, yeah, like for sure, way better equipped than I was. But I thought, let's swing for the fences. Let's just go for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know why at all, but for whatever reason, the church hired me. Might have been the dumbest decision they ever made. I don't know. But they hired me. So I did that job for 4 months. Again, essentially because of pay. And I also thought it was local, like very close to my house. And I thought it would be easy. That's horrible. Like, probably not the best reason to apply for a summer internship. But that's how, that's what happened with me. By the end of summer, I just knew God was calling me to ministry.
Wow.
I don't think I could put words to it. And it's nothing against business, but it's just something in there where I knew like who I am, my DNA, the way I'm wired. I just knew this is for me. Sometimes you use a term like when you know, you know.
When you know, you know, you know.
Yeah, and that's hard to explain to someone. But ultimately, I think there was a passion there that developed, and I sincerely love that job. I really did. On top of that, I think during that summer there was a skill set that began to develop, where I'm like, hey, maybe I could actually do this. Now I realized after that I should go get like formal education in the Bible and training and do everything I can to build that skill set up. So there's that part of it too, and I think the third part, I saw young people who needed Jesus, so there's a motivation to kind of put that passion and skill set into action. And that's really what inspired me for the last 16 years, to be honest with you, is those three things. And those three things change along the way in ministry. But I tell people over and over, when it comes to calling or how do you know, and how do you know could mean starting. How do you know could also mean stepping back. Because there's, even when I made that decision 9 years ago to go into full-time speaking, Well, the other part of the conversation is, well, how do you know it's time to step back from the church ministry? And I kind of use that same kind of assessment, with, my passion, am I passionate about this still, or, have my passion shifted a little bit through the experience, and maybe your skill set grows. And I think my skill set as a speaker grew as I was pastoring, to the point where maybe I can focus more on the skill set of speaking rather than doing the 8,000 other things, a pastor would do. And then same thing with the motivation, like why I was doing ministry. It turned into, I wanted to start doing the whole sowing the seeds. And I had to understand what that meant and what that looked like. You're sowing the seeds, not just watering them. I mean, maybe not watering them at all, but yeah, there's always that conversation. And almost every single year, to be honest, not for the last 16 years, but maybe the last 10, maybe 11, 10 years, I keep asking myself those questions almost on a yearly basis, really assess it. Like, am I still passionate about this? And a skill set, and if new passions start to develop, which I would say transparently, it's kind of happening a little bit now. Like, for the future, I'm speaking, but now I'm thinking, what happens when I hit 40 down the road? What happens when there's a baby, in the family, and what does all that look like? And all of a sudden, you start different little passions start sparking up. It'll be cool to do this, in 9 years, and if that's the case, what skill set can I start developing now, which might set me up to really put that into action? And then again, the motivation on, how can you use that to change a life or to inspire people or whatever. And so it's just an interesting conversation. But so how do you know? The surface level is when I think when you start engaging, and for at least for me, that's one of those are the 3 gauges I've had in my life.
Yeah.
I truly believe lines up with, God's calling. Like
I love how your story is one of, like, you were in this internship for 4 months and you were available for God to speak to you. Exactly. I guess is like what I see is that a lot of us are just like going on with our lives, doing our daily thing. And we don't spend a lot of time thinking, like, what does God actually want for my life? And you took like a brief part of that year, right? Mm-hmm. And God spoke so powerfully. That's amazing.
100%. And now, I mean, here we are talking, like, I make it sound so simple, right? What I'm not talking about, I'm not trying to hide it. There's still fear, there's still uncertainty, There's still like a big step of faith, there's still like, how am I going to eat along the way? And there's still that big conversation that comes. So it's not like I've had this moment where I'm like, oh, who cares about money? Like, who cares about, car insurance? Those are real questions that came along in the journey. But I do think, when you tap into those 3 things, can really help direct you in life. I really do. But
that's great.
What do I know?
Hey, we're sort of working through a series in First Peter, and one theme that keeps on coming up, and I think is really relevant to our day, is just about the Christian and suffering, and how as Christians we can be sure that difficulties are going to come up, but that those are the very times where we actually have sort of an engaging experience of Jesus in a very real way. And I was just kind of in thinking of this, I was wondering, is there a time like that maybe you want to share, just to encourage us as we're doing that together?
Yeah, like, I mean, there's always the uncertainty, right? There's always, and one of the things I can probably point back to is, again, maybe on the speaking side, and when I'm a transparent person. I'll just be transparent. When I decided to step into full-time speaking, the church I was working at, they offered me a new contract, and they're like, "Here's $68,000 to stay with us, so about 70 grand." That's a lot of money for anyone in ministry, let alone someone at that age, like mid-20s. That's a lot of money to get that offer and say no, but I really feel God's calling me to focus on traveling and speaking, which there is no salary. You're living by faith. There is that part of it where when I took that step, I think I was ready for anything. I think I was ready to, for whatever storm might come up or whatever challenge might come up. And I had so much faith in making the decision I did, where, and not like in an arrogant way. Like, I wasn't thinking, oh, God's calling me this direction, there'll be no problems. It's all going to work out. I'm going to turn into whatever it might turn into. It wasn't like that, but I just had a peace with it, knowing, what, if I fall flat on my face over the next 6 months, whatever, I can get back on my feet and, figure life out. God's still with me. And for whatever reason, in my story, it did work out, but it took years to get to a point where I am right now. Like, for example, like what people don't realize is, for years, like financially, I had nothing. Remember one particular day I was speaking, and I just had to take my car in to get fixed, and I was living out of my car. People don't realize that. I think I had $23. Like, that's it. I didn't have an extra, like, I'm not $23. And by the way, here's a couple grand in a savings account. $23 period. And I had like a $550 bill for a car repair.
Wow.
There's stuff like, and that same day I was speaking at, I'm going to date myself on this one, but at the same day I was speaking at a Reliant K concert. You know what I mean? So, 2,000, 2,500 people, and people are probably like, oh, here's a guy speaking, killing it with a big band and like big crowd. And I'm like, what they didn't know is like, I had $23 that day and, trying to figure out how to, fix my car. So there's those moments of uncertainty when you go back and you say, hey, you know what? That $68,000, salary, that sounds pretty nice right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I guess at the end of the day, I just really felt peace, knowing that it was the right decision to make at the time. And I could have been wrong, and I don't think I was when it came to this, but I probably can look at other areas of my life where I thought, hey, here's the right decision to make in this time. And it didn't work out the way I thought it could have. And I think that's where you have to continue with the trust in God.
Yeah.
Which much easier said than done, because we're still human. And sometimes you can think you're hearing from God and it's what God wants. And, and maybe it is, but he's kind of using it to direct you a completely different way.
Yeah.
Or sometimes we're just human and we're just like, hey, like, I think this is what God wants, it's what I want. And maybe we stamp the God title on it to make it feel better about making that decision. And sometimes something blows up in your face or it doesn't work out. And but I think you have to have, it's a journey for sure. It's a journey. And I think going back to it, I think it goes back to your relationship with God. And what I mean by that is, I think if you know God, like, it helps in those moments, because if something doesn't work out, I'll be honest, like even, living out of my car, and then I upgraded to sleeping. I slept on a mat in someone's garage for like 2 years. Like, if people don't realize it's part of my story, like, they're thinking, oh, you're killing it. They're probably getting paid like $5,000 a speaking engagement. I'm like, I'm sleeping beside a space heater, like in the winter, like, that's what I'm doing. Right? But knowing God, it's easy in those moments when you step off stage and go back to like a garage, to go to bed. You're still human, and it's so easy to be like, God, that's not what I signed up for. Like, and kind of start blaming God for all this junk. But the more you know God and saying, no, but I trust him. And I really felt like this was the right decision to make. And I'm so passionate, and I still see the doors opening along the way. And so when the challenges come and when all that sort of stuff, I think for me, just knowing God and just knowing my passion and knowing all those things that play a part in that, it kept me going and kept me moving forward, and it kept me making those decisions where I can assume maybe there are people, and I don't mean this as I'm better than people. It's not this at all. But I work with a lot of people who kind of have passion and dream and trying to help them establish this, even more so on the speaking side. I have a lot of people who message me who want to travel and speak. And I can't tell you how many people I've seen who quit in those moments where, like, it might not be like, in a garage beside a space heater, but the bump along the way, or, they gave it a shot for 6 months and it didn't work out the way they thought it would. And they say, well, forget this, I'm done. Although their passion might still be there, their skill set's there to be effective, and they're still motivated to, be a part of establishing God's kingdom, like, in this culture. But they say, hey, bump on the road, no thanks. And it's like they start forgetting who God is, and that God's with them, and that God, does have a plan and whatnot. And I've seen too many people, I think, I might come across judgmental, but I think I've seen too many people quit a little too early. Now it's different, maybe a year in or 2 years in, and start gauging, like, am I still passionate about this? Like, you got to have a wise conversation too, because if I've been, for the last 9 years traveling and speaking,
Yeah.
and I speak 4 times a year, well, at some point I have to have the real conversation, like, is this really, what God wants for him, at least on a full-time basis.
Yeah.
At some point you have to have the real conversation, but
Yeah.
I think as you keep assessing it and kind of checking your pulse, along the way, I think that helps too. But I'm
Mike,
not sure if I answered your question in any way, shape, or
no,
form.
dude, I love that because
It's helpful.
I think you're helping us realize the fact that like how many people pursue some sort of image of success with all its trappings, good salary, comfy home, etc., but have zero passion for what they do, as opposed to really seeking to understand their purpose and their calling and going for it, even though that might mean life is less comfortable, but they're actually alive because they're maximizing the skill set God has given them. They're capitalizing on these opportunities to engage with people, and they're actually seeing God use their life to make a difference. I mean, to be honest, I think many stories, if we look at even notable Christians throughout history, there's a lot of people whose lives started and they were in some sort of role where they had a great job, a good house, everything was clicking for them, but they just felt dead inside. And it was in being willing to lay that down and say, like, I'm going to say, God, what you have for me, that they actually discovered what God had made them for, like what they were made to do. So man, I so appreciate that. I'd never heard the sleeping in a garage with a space heater story.
Yeah,
But
I don't always share that part, but yeah, that's just the part of it people didn't see. And
yeah,
I've been blessed through it, and I think part of it was that consistency and being committed and perseverance and understanding that part of the Christian walk where it's not always easy, right? And especially on a calling, and you can go even deeper on that when you start looking at spiritual warfare and like an enemy out there trying to stop you or discourage you, because I do think there's truth to that as well. And maybe people decide I don't want to do this anymore, thinking of all these other factors, but really it could be an enemy that's trying to stop you because he knows how effective you could be or how God wants to use you. I don't know. It's a whole different conversation where I don't really know all the deep theological stuff on how spiritual warfare works sometimes, but I don't know, man. Yeah, there's a lot to that story people don't realize, and I share it not so much on this end, but share when I'm walking with people who want to speak or people who have these dreams, just to give them a good picture of the full story, where it's not just all the roses and butterflies. And
to be committed. I respect that, man. I know along the way on the journey, you mentioned Reliant K earlier, but you've ministered with and shared the stage with some pretty neat artists and speakers and people from different areas of the Christian faith or even beyond. But I'd be intrigued to know, do you have any cool stories from those partnerships, from being on a stage with Reliant K or somebody else?
Yeah, I've been so blessed. And this is another weird thing about dreams and passion. Like when I started pursuing the speaking side of ministry, over the first couple of years, I really felt more of this calling, not more of a calling, but maybe a passion to break into the music scene as a speaker, which doesn't really make sense on a logical level. Usually you want to be singing or playing guitar or bass, but to break into that scene as a speaker, so I don't know how, but little doors began to open and another door open. And over the years, I've had the privilege to team up with, just because you asked the question, with everybody, from Hillsong, Toby Mac, Skillet, like for King and Country, like Tomlin, like everybody, everybody. Let's go on and on.
That's awesome.
And same thing with speaker, like from Francis Chan to Nick Wojcik. Nick Wojcik, people don't really always recognize the name, but when you describe him respectfully, I can say this as a friend of
his. He's the Life Without Limits guy, right?
Yeah, Life Without Limits. And so if you don't know him, you might recognize him from Oprah. He was born without arms and legs. Nick, I love him. He is so one story. I'll share a story about Nick, and I'll share a story about a band, which is funny stories. The first time I met Nick was at an event. I'm not sure where it was. It was in Canada, actually. I've teamed up with him a bunch of times in the U.S., but my first time meeting him, this might be inappropriate. It's okay. I know Nick. He's cool with this. Nick obviously can't hug people. Okay, let's just say what it is. At least not with the whole full 2-arm hug. So I was in a room with Nick and maybe there's 10 other people, and people are chatting. So sometimes it's hard to hear, and Nick can be kind of soft-spoken a little bit behind the scenes. So I'm leaving this event. I say bye to Nick. I don't really know him at this point, And then I was pretty sure Nick said, "Hey, give me a hug." But in the room, it's like I'm pretty sure he said, "Give me a hug." So I like start leaning into him to give him a full hug, and like you have that moment of doubt. Like, what if he didn't say, "Give me a hug"? This will be like the most awkward moment in the entire world right now.
And did he ask for a hug? Did he want one?
Yeah, he did want one. So I heard him. What people would have thought I was tapping him or something, like
right, you're kidnapping him, yeah.
Oh, but we laughed about it. Like, I think I said, like, you did say, "Give me a hug," right? Like,
Yeah.
I love it. So there's like that funny story. I love Nick. Nick is so humble, like the most humble speaker I've ever been around.
Yeah.
And he might be, people don't realize, he might be the biggest, however you define biggest, maybe the most notable Christian speaker on the planet.
Yeah.
Like I did an event with him in the US, and after that event, he said, "I'm going to Germany, flying to Germany right after, and speaking to 6 million people." Like 6 million people. Like,
oh my.
so humble. On the band side, like, oh, yeah, I love the bands. Here's the thing with the band, like I don't listen to a lot of Christian music, and I say that just because I know I don't listen to a lot of music as much as people think I would. I don't mean that in a snobby way. Have you ever met that Christian? Maybe it's one of you guys. Not like,
yeah, Matt, actually.
Christian music, like all snobby about it. Like I don't know what their problem is. I don't listen to that stuff. Like, well, okay, don't be a snob. So I'm not like that. However, you hear different bands, on the radio, or whatever. And sometimes you don't always put your face to the name. And so sometimes you're eating lunch with someone, you're not realizing, oh, like it's a Chris Tomlin I'm eating with, or whatever it is, right? So one funny story in that connection, I was doing a festival a couple years ago, and I was walking to the bathroom behind the stage, and there's a tour buses and whatnot, and there was this man, with a beard. He had kind of like his yoga bandana type thing on, tank top and like short shorts, like way too short to be wearing in public shorts. And then he had like a yoga mat. And so I'm walking past him, and I'm not sure what he was doing. It was like a combination of yoga and like ballet. I don't know what it was. It was like the weirdest thing I've ever saw in my life. So I walked by, and I made if you know me, I make a lot of stupid comments. I'm very social. I'm like, "Oh, don't beat me up with your ballet." I said something stupid like that. He laughed, and I went to the bathroom. Whatever, continued on. Later that night, on the actual stage, not the front of the stage, but yeah, on the actual back part of the stage, I was speaking and emceeing that night, and the same guy comes walking up, and I'm like, "Hey, like, what were you doing back there?" Like, was that ballet, karate? Like, I was explaining what he's doing. We go into a big, 5-6 minute conversation. And then I said, "Oh, by the way, like, what's your role here tonight? Like, are you one of the volunteers? Are you on the sound crew?" And he was like so humble and embarrassed. He goes like, "Oh, like, I'm the lead singer of Skillet."
It's John Cooper. It's
John Cooper.
Yeah.
Decked out in like short shorts and like doing his yoga.
Oh
like,
my goodness.
That's amazing.
So humble. Like, I had no idea who I was talking to. Now when he said John Cooper Skillet, I'm like, oh crap! Like I was so embarrassed. Now I blame the beard. I'm like, hey, your beard had grown a lot. You look different. But that started up a really great friendship with John.
Yeah.
So the last like 6 years, I think Skillet might be the closest band, the band I'm closest to in the Christian ministry, in the Christian world. And but it all started with me basically making fun of this man doing. Again, I can't even explain what it was, but it just looked inappropriate.
Oh man, I gotta say,
so cool. I love it. It was so fun.
Oh, that's awesome, man. You know what, Mike, I appreciate you sharing the story, just because it's so neat when you meet these people, whether it's Nick or John, who have such platforms, and but they're so real. They'll talk to anybody. They're so down to earth. I mean, I met John Cooper Kingdom Bound one time, and I was still a high schooler, and he was just doing a radio interview at this one pop-up tent, and I remember talking to him on the side and just asking some questions, and it was like he was like just like your youth leader or something. He was just like, "Yeah, what's up, man?" and so engaging, and you just really appreciate they really see themselves not only as having that big platform, but also a really interpersonal platform with other people. So I love that, though. I love that you're like, "Who are you, the janitor?" "Oh no, I'm the lead singer of Skillet." Yeah, 100%, man.
I love
That's
it.
great. Well, we're kind of coming to a close here, but before we end, we're just gonna fire off a couple questions. But the first of those
I'll keep them short.
is like, what have you been passionate about these days? Is there something that you've been thinking about in the realm of Christianity, or something that God's just really placed on your heart?
Yeah.
We'd love to hear.
It's a great question. Lots of great questions. So part of the speaking, I would say a typical talk I do is about a 30-minute monologue, essentially. I'm on the front line of that field, and I'm convinced with this young generation coming up, I'm convinced a 30-minute monologue sermon is not going to be effective in the next 5-10 years. It might be a little longer than that, but I feel like we're going to hit a point where it's not working anymore, or not working as well as it could. So one of the things I'm passionate about and trying to figure out, and I don't have an answer to it, is almost how do you reinvent a sermon? And how do you create something, especially for a young generation that's doing everything like on their phone or doing everything, video and, but if you want them to come to church or a youth ministry, there is usually a time of, hey, let's have a talk. How can you take that and change it or tweak it or redo it so these kids are walking away, engaged, they're paying attention, because if you're sharing Jesus, you want them to pay attention to that message.
Yeah.
But also walking away remembering it, and remembering, hey, what did we talk about, or what was that conversation? So one of the things I'm kind of trying to figure out, and it connects with the passion, connects with what I'm doing, connect with the young generation, is trying to figure out, like, what does communicating look like to young people, who will be, they're the church now. Doesn't matter if you're senior high, they are the church right now. But I think in a couple of years, they'll make up more the main demographic of maybe a Sunday morning gathering. And how do I get ready for that, or how can I help people get ready for that? Because I do think church will look different in 15 years, 20 years, when all of a sudden these youth are now 35, 40 years old. So that's something I'm passionate about. I don't have any answers, but hopefully I can be on the front line of trying to figure that out.
Yeah,
I love that. Just that speaks to I love that you're thinking about innovation, because that's I think that's so valuable. Obviously it's a timeless message, but you're constantly thinking about relevant ways to communicate it in a way that engages people's learning styles in a really effective way. So yeah, I love that, man. Hey, Mike, can I ask you, where can we learn more about you and the work you're a part of?
Great question. Social media is an easy way. Facebook or Instagram. I think my handle on both is official Mike Gordon. And the official, I know it sounds arrogant. There's a more popular guy with the same name I have, who has taken that handle, like normal Mike, or not normal, like at Mike Gordon. So official Mike Gordon. Yeah. I have to do official. It was either official Mike Gordon or Mike Gordon, like 8,242, like something. And then I got a website where I post a lot of my stuff on there. So behindthemic.ca.
Behindthemic.ca. So Twitter, Facebook, Instagram at official Mike Gordon, and behindthemic.ca.
Yeah, and add me on social. Add me, say hello. I'll message you back.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Mike, thank you so much. We're really grateful for you giving this time and sharing from your heart today.
Thank you. You guys are awesome. Keep it up. Keep doing this, okay?
Hey, thanks, man. We appreciate it.
You guys are awesome. Hey, thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks a
Take
lot.
care.